Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us. I am Paula Fontana, Vice President of Strategic Programming Initiatives with the National Black MBA Association, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to Walk the Walk, How to Develop an Executive Presence. And I have to say that I have been looking forward to this webinar all day long. So it is sponsored by Cisco. And our presenter today is fabulous. I know you're in for a treat. So a little bit about her. She is a 20-year veteran at Cisco. So I am assured that she knows all about how to develop an executive presence. So Ta-Nikka Harrison has led teams in a variety of roles and businesses across the company. She is a director of supply chain operations, where she is responsible for the end-to-end product lifestyle management across all Cisco branded products. She is also a volunteer and has a wonderful family. Again, with all of that background, all of that knowledge, she will bring this executive presence to the virtual stage and will teach you how to do the same. Ta-Nikka, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Robin, and thank you so much, Paula. That was a wonderful opening. I will tell you, it is a real pleasure for me to be here this evening, especially among my brothers and sisters who look like me. So it certainly brings a smile to my face tonight. Chris, let's go ahead to the next slide. So how does a little brown girl from Bedford-Stuyvesant Brooklyn grow up to be a senior director of supply chain for a Fortune 500 tech company? I will tell you guys, I've never imagined being here in my wildest dreams, but that meant that I was dreaming too small, and that's something that I share with my team. Never dream too small. So for me as a kid, I loved computers. I loved tinkering with things just to see how they worked. And when I was about 7 or 8, I used to play with a few kids in my aunt's neighborhood who had a similar love for tinkering. One summer, we had chosen to take apart an old bike. We found a milk crate from the trash at the corner bodega, and we built a go-kart. We made it work. We rode that go-kart down the hill like a champion. The one thing that we forgot to add, because we were 8, was brakes. And because we were young, we didn't really care. So we kind of Fred Flintstoned it and used our feet. Sometimes we used our knees and elbows to bring it to a stop. But it was that summer that really helped me to realize that I wanted to do more of that. I wanted to make stuff, and it was even better if I can, somehow weave in computers into that. And that's essentially what started me on my journey into the world of engineering. So I studied electrical engineering technology at the Rochester Institute of Technology, located in Rochester, New York. So that was about 8 hours from home for me. I chose RIT because they were one of the top universities in New York that had a great engineering program. But the one thing that was the icing on the cake for me was that they had a co-op program that was embedded in as part of our graduation requirements. And the co-op programs were essentially a 6 to 9 month long internship where you earn money as well as credits as part of your graduation requirements. And for me, what I loved about the co-op programs was that it exposed me to the industry, first of all, so that I can get feedback on whether or not I would really love to do what I was going to school for. So that was a nice, free peek in field. My co-ops were all about product development and testing, and I loved every minute of it. A year after graduating from college, I started my career at Cisco in Silicon Valley. So that was, roughly 3,000 miles away from home. And I never looked back. Here I am. So it's actually 21 years later. So just over 20. So 21 years later. And I still work for Cisco, but out of RTP. So I am based in North Carolina now. I started in supply chain. I still work in supply chain. And now as a senior director for our product operations team. So I'm involved with the launch of new products and making sure that we can build and ship throughout the entire life cycle. So for me, it was an amazing journey, especially when I think back about that 8-year-old girl building a go-kart out of a milk crate and old bicycle parts. So that's my story of how I ended up at Cisco. Chris, let's go to the next slide. So today I want to talk to you all about executive presence. You can Google, you can YouTube, and I'm sure you'll find a variety of feedback and videos on it. I will tell you, as a leader, I am constantly evolving myself, as well as grooming my own team members to shape their executive presence. And for me, when I think about executive presence, I think about the qualities, both spoken and unspoken, in how you show up. Are you signaling to others that you have what it takes? Can you be authentic, yet have a balance in how you conform to the culture in your company? To me, those qualities are wrapped up in a few main areas. The first is something that I know you guys hear pretty often. It's called gravitas. So gravitas is all about how you act. To me, it's your presence. It's showing that you have what it takes to be there, to be in that room, even virtually. Gravitas is showing that you can connect with others. It's showing that you have empathy. It's having the ability to have grace under fire. And I think about Michelle Obama's line that she said, when they go low, you go high, right? Can you show that grace under fire? Gravitas is about you being confident and being able to bring others along. The second quality is about communication. So how you speak, your tone. And to me, it's even your written communications, especially since we're in a virtual environment. So one thing for me is, are you multitasking on a device when you should be giving eye contact? I'll tell you, I am on video conferences all day. The first thing I do is I'm looking at the video so that I can see, are people giving me feedback? Are they giving me eye contact even through the camera? Are you sending messages? So when you're sending emails and things, are you sending a message in all caps, right? So are you making sure that you can parlay a message with the right set of tone, even in a written style of communication? How do you sound when you're speaking? Do you sound confident? Do you sound abrasive? So all those things get wrapped up into that second pillar, just around communications. The third is about your appearance. And it's not appearance for appearance sake. It's, to me, do you appear approachable? Are you sitting there with your arms folded? Are you rolling your eyes, right? Are you engaged? Are your clothes neat? Do you appear to be groomed? I still have a lot of conversations with some of our summer interns about how they show up, right? You want to be neat. You want to have your pants pulled up. All of those things go in to show that appearance. Even if you're on video, are you showing up in pajamas or things that are not necessarily professional attire? Things like that. So you want to make sure that you're focused on how you show up in terms of your appearance. And to me, all three of those qualities, so the gravitas, the communications, the appearance, those are all qualities that roll up into executive presence. So how are you showing up? Chris, let's go to the next slide. Okay. So we know that executive presence is all about how we show up. How do we develop our executive presence? Even as an MBA student, maybe you're a student right now, maybe you're a grad, maybe you graduated and you're, earlier in career, so you've already started your career trajectory. How can we develop that executive presence? And so I love to stick with the themes of three. And so there are three focus areas that I believe are foundational to building your executive presence. So the first is around your brand. So knowing your brand. The second is around visibility. So how you're showing up. Are you intentional? Are you even visible? And the third, I count it kind of as your ability to grow, right? DIY disruption. And we'll talk a little bit about that when we get into the following slides. So let's spend a few minutes on each of those. Chris, let's go ahead to the next slide. We'll do a little bit of a deep dive in there. So that first is on branding and knowing your brand. And my first experience with branding was actually in childhood. So I would say my preteen years and early teenage years. Before I was a Harrison, I was a Keys. And that was my family name. We Keyses are intellectual types. We have careers in service of others. We are military people. We are police officers. We are teachers. We are engineers. We are even skilled laborers. Keyses go to college. If you don't go to college, we work hard to provide for our families. We take pride in our family name. We celebrate our accomplishments at reunions. Our grandparents call up everybody and tell everybody about that A+ that so-and-so made on the test, because we are Keyses, and that's what Keyses do. That was the message that I heard growing up. And that's what helped me to strive for big goals and not to settle for anything less. So we always find a way to make great things happen. And we always bring others along with us. I was a Keys, and that's what Keyses do. That was my brand, right? That was part of my brand. And I carried that brand into the workforce. As an early engineer, I asked a lot of questions. Engineers are curious people, and for me, it was, I wanted to learn how things worked. Why did we do so-and-so? Tell me a little bit of, more about this. I offered to do work for other people. And for me, it was just a way to see things from their perspective. I was not afraid to do hard projects because no matter what, again, my goal was to learn. I was going to learn something new from the experience. And so I raised my hand quite often to be able to do those projects as an early engineer. As a leader, I meet with my direct reports, who are managers. I meet with their staff. I actually even meet with our temporary workers, so those contractors. And for me, I treat everybody as one team because they provide some level of value to me and they provide some level of value to Cisco. And I want them to be seen. So my goal is to help them to learn and to help them to get doors opened, right? Just in the same way that someone did that for me. So what is your brand? What are the things that you are known for? How do people describe you when you're not in the room? Even in a virtual environment, your brand still shows. Remember, I mentioned about communication being written or verbal or even physical. So how are you showing up, even on camera, in this virtual environment, on these virtual stages? Are you paying attention in your meetings? Are you paying attention in the class if you're still in school? And I really like the quote on the slide. If you don't build a personal brand, somebody else will brand you with the wrong label. So you need to pay attention to your brand. Know your brand. Okay, Chris, let's go to the next slide. So now let's talk about your visibility. As a leader, I have a mix of employee experiences within my team. I have people with over 20 years experience, as well as employees who started at the company just 6 months ago. And each one of them have the ability to bring value to the team by delivering on the outcomes, right? So what are the things that we're driving? My team drives a lot of transformation. So I mentioned that, I work in product operations. That means we're the face to our engineering partners. That means, we're looking at their strategy for releasing new products. And our job is to make sure it's a consistent process that they follow, because on the other side of that, I'm hoping is a delightful customer saying, yes, Cisco, do more of that. And so we want to make sure that each of our team members are delivering value by driving those outcomes. And the size and the complexity of those outcomes can certainly vary with experience. Somebody who's been here 6 months is not going to drive the same level of experiences as somebody that's been here for 20 years, but they are all of value, right? They're all able to drive some outcomes and to have some ownership. The one thing that I am immensely proud of at Cisco is our ability to get somebody ramped up, and I'll say driving within the first 90 days of work. And being early in career, it doesn't mean you can't drive yet, right? To me, you have your license. We're putting you in the car. You might start in the back seat, or you might even go shotgun, but you're in the car. The point is to get you in that car, because it's that exposure and that experience that's going to help you start wetting that whistle, right? We want to get you exposed. We want to make sure that you size the work so that you have that direct ownership, something that you can drive yourself, because ultimately that's going to build your knowledge base, and that's going to help you build up your subject matter expertise. And that exposure, to me, is key. That's what helps us to have good development plans, even for early in career employees. And the one thing I'm very proud of is we create these development plans all across your work experience, all of your years, because we know that you are the next in line, right? You are our pipeline, and we're invested in you. And for me, even our summer interns, right? So people who are still in school, we give those students an opportunity to solve problems for us as part of something we call a case competition. And what we do, these students are given a specific challenge that we are actually facing as a company. And you guys kind of see a lot of this stuff on the news today with different component shortages that are happening across the industry. And, trying to be very creative on how we build up our resiliency so that we can continue to build a product, because like I said, we want a delightful customer on the other side of that. And so we tend to have these case competitions where we can look at different ways and different problems that we are trying to solve. And even students who are still in school, still learning, they have perspectives and they have values that through those case competitions, we're able to see that. And so those case competitions generally run about 6 weeks. And those students are going to research. They're going to figure out, well, what's the problem? Excuse me, what have we done in the past? What things haven't we tried yet? They're going to go out and they're going to talk to other people across the company. It could be within the same organization. It could be external to the organization. It could even be some of our customers or some of our customer-facing partners. And their job is really to work on a pitch, right? So what is that potential solution? We're not asking them to build a solution because it's only been 6 weeks, but we're asking them to give enough due diligence in there to come up with some thinking, right? That may be a pitch that could turn into something that we can use. And I've personally seen at least 2 case studies where they became the foundation for multi-million-dollar investments that we're driving in supply chain. And that is real value. And that's coming from interns, right? So for you, what I want you guys to think about is, what projects are you driving? How does your work translate into tangible business outcomes? Are you trying to improve efficiency? Are you trying to save costs? Are you looking at a new business model, maybe a new way that we need to go to market, new opportunity for customers? Do key people know that you're working on a project? Do they know the role that you're playing? Or are you invisible? Right? Your job is to be visible. We want you to be intentional. And I always use this line with my earlier in careers. We don't want anybody to be a glorified admin who's just sitting there taking notes, right? Notes are important. Don't get me wrong. Notes are certainly important. But we want you to be an active participant. And you can do that at every stage in your career. Your job is to be visible. Your job is to be intentional, which means you need to be an active participant. Okay, so far we've learned we've got to focus on building our brand, knowing your brand, and it's also about being visible, right? Those are things that we want to use to develop our executive presence. Now let's take a look at the last focus area. Chris, let's go ahead and, okay, thank you. So our last focus area is what we call DIY disruption, or do-it-yourself disruption. And if we look at the quote from Barack Obama, it says, "Change will not come if we wait for some other person or some other time. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the change that we seek." And to me, this focus is about your growth. So in order to grow, you need to keep reinventing yourself. You cannot keep doing the same thing over and over and over again. To me, you'll become stagnant. And I listen to, a lot of folks, they feel like being, flying under the radar brings you safety. It doesn't. And trust me, as leaders, we know those people. We actually want you to make sure you're continuing to grow, continuing to stretch. When I became a leader, and that was about 12 years ago, and it wasn't because I said, well, one day I'm going to run this organization. In fact, I actually didn't have any aspiration of becoming a people leader. And partly because I was not exposed to somebody who looked like me in that type of role. Now, mind you, I'm an African-American female in a tech company in Silicon Valley, right? So there just wasn't a lot of folks who looked like me. So I loved my job. I loved everything about my job. I learned new things every single day. I was able to meet with different people across the company. I was able to travel the world. I'll tell you, when I started working at Cisco, that was when I got my passport. And I was so proud of that first passport. I traveled a lot within the US, but I had never left the country. And so it was with Cisco and the work that I was doing, I was able to actually travel the world. And my job taking me to places like Thailand, and actually I think Thailand was my first trip. I still remember that flight from Raleigh to New York, which is a quick hop, but then I flew direct from New York to Bangkok, and that was almost 20 hours in the air. But it was amazing. That trip was amazing. And to meet a lot of the talented people that supported a lot of our product development, it was eye-opening for me. That's the kind of exposure you simply cannot pay for. So I went to places like Thailand. I went to, places in China. I went to Austria. I went to Hungary. I went to Switzerland. I went to India. And that actually includes, places within the US, right? So I traveled around the US where we've had a lot of our fulfillment. So places in the Carolinas, in Texas, and even on the West Coast as well. And for me, I loved working as a team. I love sharing what I've learned so that others can grow. And not only that, I asked to help on projects where those projects just seemed to struggle, right? We couldn't get things across the finish line, or we ran into one barrier or the next. Those were the ones that I actually wanted to help with because at the end of the day, if it wasn't, they were already struggling, so I couldn't make it worse than what it was. And so for me, it was about being able to take that opportunity to learn something, right? I may not have had all the expertise, but I was willing to roll up my sleeves and learn. And we had team members that also wanted to do that. And personally, I also wanted to use that as an opportunity to build a network of people who had various skills, so that if I didn't know something directly, at least I was starting to build that Rolodex, right? I was starting to connect those dots to, another team. Maybe they might know a little bit more, maybe they might know a lot more, but those started to become those seeds. And it was through those types of assignments, right, where I can start to build those types of networks. And for me, it was, my ability to take on those types of hard projects and connect the dots, using it as an opportunity to coach others. That's what helped me pivot into the leadership role about 12 years ago. And I have never looked back, right? I've been on that trajectory since. And my message to you is that the opportunity can show up in many places. And so to help develop your executive presence, you need to do more than just your day job. You can't stay stagnant. You have to find a way to continue to add value. You have to find a way to keep thinking outside the box. And your perspectives matter. It doesn't matter how much work experience you have. I already shared with you about things that even our summer interns were able to do. And we took those as nuggets to actually put real money behind their pitches to actually do something, right? So everything, it still does have value. You don't have to be here for 20 years in any company to be able to provide value. And with that, the other thing that I want to say there is you drive the work, but you need to be intentional in how you track those accomplishments, right? You got to do that throughout your career. If you don't do that, you kind of forget, right? Oh yeah, those were the big projects that I've had. So you need to start building that Rolodex. So that way you can look back and see, here's the things that I was able to influence. These are the things that I was able to actually drive, right? Those accomplishments then become the foundation, and it actually becomes part of your brand. You get known for doing those things and reaching out, doing stuff that's, just not part of your day job. It's a little bit more beyond that. Okay, Chris, let's go to the next slide. And so, we learned that executive presence is about how you show up. It's about how you are signaling to others that you have what it takes. We learned it's about gravitas. It's how you act. Are you graceful under fire? So Michelle Obama, they go low, you go high. It's about how you communicate. Are you speaking clearly? What's your tone? Are you abrasive? Right? So how are you communicating? It's about how you look. Are you approachable? Are you sitting back with your arms folded? Are you rolling your eyes? Right? So it's all about how you look as well. Are you approachable there? And I gave you 3 focus areas to use to develop your executive presence. The first was on building and knowing your brand. What do people say about you when you're not around? What are you known for? The next was on being visible and being intentional. Do your stakeholders even know who you are? Do they know what role you're playing? Or are you just present? This is your opportunity to actually make a difference. And last, we talked about being disruptive and thinking outside the box. Doesn't matter how much experience you have. Everybody has the opportunity to be disruptive and making sure you're doing something outside the norm. Are you continuing to grow? Are you learning new things? Are you taking on the hard assignments? Or are you doing the same thing day in and day out? I like to think about my husband every time I think about this DIY disruption. My husband also works for Cisco, and he's been at Cisco a year longer than I have. And the one thing he prided himself on was being able to have this constant disruption, right? So what thing is he able to do differently and really stretch himself? And every few years, he takes a big, bold risk and tries something new at Cisco. And for him, that's been every 3 to 5 years. And it's worked wonders for him. So those are things you need to think about, the strengths that you bring, as well as how you can be disruptive in that regard to keep reinventing yourself. And so to me, what are those tangible calls to action that you can do? Every time I go to different webinars, I always have my notepad, and I try to jot down, what are some of those things that I can take away, that I can learn, that I can apply, the minute we hang up from this call. And what I have are a couple of things that I believe you can do effective immediately, as soon as the call ends. And the first is going to be identifying your strength. So what are some of those strengths that you have? What are you good at? What are you known for? I told you about the Keyses do what Keyses do. Some of those come with some branding and strengths, which means, we kind of focus on the big, hard, hairy things. That's what Keyses did. And that's what I did. And keep in mind that even your personal strengths can translate into professional strengths. Are you a good listener? Right? Are you that friend that everybody goes to for advice because they trust your judgment? Those are things you need to think about, because those truly do show up as strengths. And I'm sure they can translate into professional ones as well, potentially even careers. My son is only 14, and I told him, or he's almost 14, I told him, I think one day you're going to become a lawyer, because he's always negotiating with the teachers. And it's not in a negative way, but it's always in a way in which the teachers actually take a step back and they say, he's not wrong. And the fact that he's able to even drive that conversation at age 13, it's a natural muscle for him. And I just planted that seed in his head, right? That maybe one day you want to think about that. The next thing is being aware of your personal brand. And I have this conversation quite a bit with my earlier in careers, and that's around how you show up even on social. So as a hiring manager, I create job opportunities as well. And the first communications that I might see of you may not be that resume, right? It could be how you're showing up on LinkedIn. It could be some of the tweets. So you need to think about how your name is associated on social. Just be aware of that, and how your brand, how that can translate into your brand before I even get a chance to know you. So one thing you may want to do is just take a catalog of that, right? The next advice, and I still use this today, even for myself, I call it scheduling a 15-minute coffee talk, with a key leader. And that can be, with your boss's boss. It can be with, a leader in a different organization. It actually can even be with a company that you're interested in, right? Maybe you've seen somebody on LinkedIn doing something that you're interested in, or the company has a career path, right, that you want to do a little bit of a double click on. To me, be brave, right? Ask for the time. It's 15 minutes. Most people are willing to give you 15 minutes with no strings attached. And that's a way for folks to learn who you are. So if it's within your company, it's a way for them to learn who you are, which helps you to build your networks. If you're reaching out to someone at a company that you don't know, right? So you're just trying to get a little bit of a door open or some insights. Be bold and reach out there. I see quite a few people pinging me on LinkedIn as well. We typically do a 5-minute conversation versus 15, but it creates an opportunity to open that door. And it gives me a way to be able to look at skill sets, right? For people that I may not have had in my network. Those are all opportunities for you folks. So make sure you use that. So be brave. Ask for the 15 minutes. The worst somebody can say is no, but you will be surprised how many times it's a yes. Okay. And then the last thing, again, was, to me, it's all about the DIY disruption, right? So kind of reinventing yourself. To me, it's saying yes to the stretch assignments. So if you're going to grow, it means that you need to be exposed to new things. You can ask to join a project as a stretch assignment. Maybe there's an opportunity for you there to lean in. If you're not working, let's say you're still in school, can you volunteer at within an organization? Can you volunteer even somewhere within the school? All of those pose opportunities for you to develop and to grow your strengths. From that, you never know where those opportunities can show up. And you want to be able to use those and leverage those for all those levers. So to me, 4 key things on tangible things you guys can do as soon as this webinar is over. Identify your strengths. What are you good at? What are you known for? Ask people as well what they think your strengths are. You'll be surprised at what might show up there. Be aware of your personal brand. Take a few minutes and just catalog how you show up on social. It's not a bad thing, but be aware that hiring managers typically are Googling your name, right? So how are you showing up in cyberspace? Be aware of that. Schedule that 15-minute coffee talk, right? So if you're working, go ahead and reach out to a key leader. Look at those org charts. If there's some, a career that you want to get a little bit of a double click on, be brave and reach out on LinkedIn. You never know how many times somebody might say yes to you. Don't assume it's going to be a no. And then that last thing, as I mentioned, say yes to the stretch. Pick up that stretch assignment, right? Do that with your work, or join a volunteer organization and try that. Okay. So Chris, let's open it up to Q&A.
Yeah, perfect. Well,
what do we have coming through?
Yeah, let me check. First, I appreciate you taking us to school there, Ta-Nikka, on executive presence. We so appreciate you there. Give me one moment to pull up some questions real fast.
Okay.
Okay, we got one. I'll go ahead and. So this one, this is super important, right? We talk about mentors and sponsors, right, Ta-Nikka, and how just beneficial and greatly they are to one's career and development. Can you just explain the importance of sponsorship, and also talk about it from how it's really impacted your career, right? We'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah. And so I look at mentors, first of all, those are traditionally people that I look to for coaching, right? So what things can they share for me to grow and kind of learn new things? Those mentors may have been people who have done the role, that I'm doing, or they're in a role that I want to be, one day when I grow up. So those are the mentors, right? I kind of see them as coaches. Sponsors, on the other hand, I look at them as advocates. So when I am not in that room, can they actually speak for my potential? Can they advocate for me in different forums? Maybe there's an assignment that people don't know about yet. And so as part of that whole branding, are those sponsors able to actually help speak on my behalf and speak, about me, to be able to elevate me right into that next level? So I kind of look at them as 2 different things. They can be the same role, the same person, but typically they're different. And so I'm a mentor for some folks, a lot of my early in careers, and then I'm a sponsor for others, people that are on that, management trajectory, because I want to advocate for them, as we're looking at that talent pipeline. And so for me, I've had both throughout my career. So, prior to becoming a people leader, I had mentors, and I sought out, some folks. Typically companies will assign you your first mentor. As I started getting more experience, I would actually seek out others who I wanted to mentor me, and I established that relationship with them. And as I started looking at that people leader path, or that leadership path, that's when I started to seek out those sponsors. And the sponsors were the ones that helped advocate for me and created opportunity that may not have actually been there. And so I actually think both are important as you get into your careers, because they have different functions that they play, but all are valuable, right, to your growth and being able to shape your executive presence.
Perfect. Thank you, Ta-Nikka. This kind of relates to our next one here. Can you, this person wrote, have you ever experienced imposter syndrome? Right. It's so
every day.
Right. It's so, Ta-Nikka, can you talk about how do you encourage yourself, right? How do you kind of keep going and kind of keep that mindset of learning a new role or a new process? Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. And I was very transparent earlier in this dialogue about, being an African-American female in tech in Silicon Valley. And this is at Cisco, so there was not very many people who look like me. When I think back, across my 21 years, and again, I've been in supply chain, so I'm going to speak from a supply chain perspective. I can remember two leaders that were in power, right? Leadership, senior leadership roles that were African-American. So neither were female, just male. And it was hard for me to believe I can be anything, close to the levels in the organization that they were. And so as I started getting into leadership, within a few years, there was a, African-American female. So I was able to see one who actually looked like me as I was climbing that ladder. And now I'm the single African-American female in supply chain. And so I've become that role model, right, to the people that are within my pipeline. And so I always had that feeling, that imposter syndrome of, should I even be here? Right? It's like, are there other reasons why I'm in the position that I'm in? And that answer is, Ta-Nikka, it's about your work. It's about your brand. It's about everything you've been known for, because people are seeking you out for those opportunities and in that role. But it's this constant needing that feedback, right? To make sure that I belong here, right? To remind me of why I'm here. And at Cisco, we have these employee resource organizations, so EROs, we call them. And we have Cisco Black professionals, as well as Cisco Black directors. So other people who look like me that are also in similar leadership roles. And that's from a director level up, right, into the vice president titles. And that's in other organizations. So it's supply chain as well as operations and customer service, et cetera. So that creates another way to get that feedback that, I belong here, we belong here, and we're able to share those experiences with each other so that, iron striking iron, we're kind of feeding and pouring into each other. The last piece of that is just around being able to use executive coaches, right? So when I first became a people leader, I actually had a coach to help me pivot from being an individual contributor to actually being a leader. And that took a lot of work for me to be there, because again, it was that imposter syndrome. Why me? Why wasn't it, this other person? And so it was probably about 6 months with that coach on how do I celebrate, that I belong here, right? What things can I employ, and how do I actually shift that to focus on building my team strength? That was a huge help. I just got promoted to senior director about 4 months ago. And so I'm interviewing, right? I'm in the process of starting those interviews for my next executive coach for the same thing, because it doesn't stop, right? We continue to need that. And as I mentioned, there's a lot on my shoulders, because I'm the only one that looks like me in this role. And so there's always that feeling there. And I'm able to use a lot of the other female leaders who don't look like me, but there's other female leaders that have been immensely important to me, both from just a mentorship and sponsorship, as well as being able to listen at how they got into their trajectories and how they dealt with it, right? They're going through the same things. And so I'm actually excited about being able to look at that next steps of how to, employ an executive coach, because I continue to need it as well. So hopefully that helped.
Perfect. That's great, Ta-Nikka. And we have, I want to give a special shout out to the folks on the webinar. You all are awesome. We have like 19 questions and counting. So we're going to try to get to everything, but I know we got about 15 minutes, so we'll do our best here. The next question for you, Ta-Nikka, is, I'm interested to hear this one. So is there anything that you wish you would have done differently in your career? If so, what impact do you think it would have had on where you are today?
So as an engineer, I'm always thinking logically, right? You do step 1 through 5 and you kind of follow that sequence there. I think it took me 10 years to know that I can actually be a people leader. And I think I've watched opportunity go by because I was afraid, right, of taking that leap. And again, it goes back to the previous question on the imposter syndrome. So, why are you trying to, be something that maybe you're not ready for? And I think if I was able to capitalize on that earlier, I might be even further along than where I am today. And so I feel like I'm on the back end trying to make up, right, for that lost time. What I do love that I decided to do is I took the risk and I moved to Silicon Valley, right? All of my family are on the East Coast, right? So we're, New York, and my family roots are actually North Carolina, which is why I relocated to RTP. But being able to take those big risks while very early in my career, being in Silicon Valley, I think I would do that again. That was what gave me my foundation. That's what helped me to build my networks. And traditionally, when I'm, pre-COVID, when I speak to university graduates and folks that are early in career, I would tell them to say yes to wherever that opportunity is, because at any point you can always move. Say yes to the opportunity, get your feet in the door, and then you can think about, what things you might need to do differently a little bit later from there. So that part I would repeat again. But for me, I think it was just taking so long to recognize my strengths and being able to take on opportunities that maybe I didn't quite feel ready for, but everybody else felt that I was, right? I kept being this cautious engineer type, like waiting for it to logically, I need 100% before I can jump. And, sometimes 50% is enough, right? When you get there, you'll continue to learn and you'll continue to grow. You don't have to master that through to perfection because you might miss the bus.
Okay, perfect. So we have another question for you, Ta-Nikka, about kind of what are you currently reading? So are there any books you would recommend that have helped your growth and development? And before you answer that, Ta-Nikka, I'll go ahead and switch to the resource slide.
Yeah, absolutely. Please do.
Before we go ahead and jump into that.
Okay. So you have a couple of them there. Sylvia Ann, Hewlett has a couple of different books. So Executive Presence is one. And it's funny, I was gifted her book on a trip into India, and they happened to be doing a webinar. And so I actually have, Sylvia's book, and it was only it was sellable in India for that particular one a few years ago. The Rise is a book, that my husband had purchased for me Christmas. So just this Christmas. And I finished that book in literally a day. And I am still, there's so many Post-it notes, and I call them golden nuggets. And traditionally what I do is, as I read books, I go back through them pretty much every year, right? Just because there's something that resonates with me as I get a little bit more experience. And, Rise is about advancing your career and how to stand out as a leader. The other big one for me is Stephen Covey's book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And he has a quadrant which goes into how you prioritize work, right? Is it important? Is it urgent? Is it not important? And I use that each week to try and identify what are the biggest things that I need to focus on to drive outcomes. Everything that comes my way is not the same level of importance. And so I use that with a lot of my team members as well, right? That's a nice litmus test to see what things are fire drills and then what things are truly going to, move the needle. The last book, you don't have it here, but Michael Hyatt, last name is Hyatt. He has a book called Free to Focus. And it's very similar to Stephen Covey, where Michael looks at how do we start focusing our time on the right things. And for me, it's written really well for leaders, where it talks about, what's your vision? Where, again, do you spend the highest amount of your time, as well as what things can you delegate? And he gives like a model of, what are the levels of delegation that you can do? Is it a full delegation? Is it a partial? And it's a book that I read every year, because each time I'm learning something a little bit different, especially as I've been expanding my team. And so Free to Focus is another way, very similar to Stephen Covey's book, but Free to Focus gives me a little bit of a workbook style, so that I can start to carve out, where are my efforts best spent, and then what things can I do to groom my pipeline behind me to take on more responsibility to free me up for that. So I hope that helps.
Perfect. Thank you, Ta-Nikka. I know we got about 8 minutes left, so we can work in a couple more. Can you share, Ta-Nikka, being in such a large company, what's your best advice for someone seeking to become a people leader and gain those skills and advocacy that you mentioned in your presentation?
Yeah. So stretch assignments, that's typically where I have people to start, because it does give you a sense for the type of work that can come through and where you can actually add some value. And to me, I feel like it's less risk because it was a stretch to begin with. And so I typically start with the stretch assignments. I would say as well, are you able to take on a team lead role? So maybe you're not the manager of the group, but can you actually be a team lead where you're helping to coach some of the other members on the team directly? So that team lead is kind of a freebie way to get a taste at management. And I'm actually doing that with a gentleman in my group who's been around about 5-6 years, and he has aspirations of people management, and I'm making him a lead. Right. So I'm giving you a project, I'm letting you own it, and I'm actually communicating out to the masses that his role is as a lead. So that gives him a little bit of a boost up so that people can learn to go to him, even though his title's not manager. So being that team lead is a free way to be able to take on that stretch. If you're not employed, you're not working, I mentioned before, you can use your volunteer opportunities, right, to do that same thing. So in my before pre-COVID, I was volunteering with Junior Achievement, going into the classrooms, and I would go into 8-9 different classrooms over the school year, and that also gave me a way to kind of get back into the classes for the youth, to be able to kind of drive projects there. But what I did is I actually took people at Cisco into the classroom with me, because it gave them a chance to learn how to, present in front of others, and how to be able to, show up in a different way to kind of get comfortable with that. So to me, even the volunteer opportunities are a way for you to kind of get free grooming without a whole lot of risk, because again, it was volunteering.
Great.
So never discount those things.
Great. Nika, you in your presentation, you mentioned some situations, right, where you're the only Black woman in the room,
Yes.
right? This question is related to that, right? Can you share, do you have any advice for others in the same situation, right? How can they navigate and advance their career without being overlooked?
Yeah. And again, I think we talked a little bit about making sure you're tracking your accomplishments. I don't think we do enough work celebrating that and making sure that that's visible. So being able to kind of keep track of that and communicating that up to your leadership directly. If you have an opportunity, again, I mentioned Cisco has employee resource organizations. I'm using that again as a way to learn what others are doing. And these are, again, Cisco Black professionals and Cisco Black directors. So they're people like me who are going down the similar paths. It might just be in a different organization, but we're sharing, those sorts of stories and things like that. And then, Chris, one of the first questions you asked was about sponsorships. That's the other way, right? You got to get your name in people's mouths. And so reaching out to people to ask them to be a sponsor. I have 6, 7 different people right now. That's a mix of mentorship and sponsorship. And that includes people that are very new to Cisco. They are not in my team, but they saw in the directory that I look like them and they look like me. And guess what? We meet every other month. And so I make the time because I need them to be that pipeline. And that helps them to, with the branding, and it gives them an advocate on their behalf before they've even started their careers. So I think you need to, again, it was on the call to action, scheduling that 15-minute coffee talk. Look in your organizational directories. Do people look like you? Start there. That's a freebie. Even if they don't look like you, who's the highest ranking person that you can build a bridge to do those same coffee talks? Because I do those with people who look like me and the ones who don't, because they need to know who I am. So don't be afraid to do that.
Great. And I know we have 3 minutes, Ta-Nikka, so I think we have time for one last question.
Okay.
Our sincere apologies for the folks that, again, we won't get to your question. I see there's like 22 questions, Ta-Nikka, so you've definitely been pretty hot and popular tonight.
Awesome. Well,
So
let me say anything we can't get to, Paula and Robin, if you want to email those over, I am happy to respond. You just let me know. I'm happy to respond.
Perfect. Our last question here is about work-life balance, Ta-Nikka. So as a leader in your company, how do you manage work-life balance?
My husband would come into this room right now and say, she doesn't have any. It is a work-life blend, right? You put in the things that you want to put in. So weekends, for example, Saturday, I don't turn on that computer. I don't do anything related to work. Sunday night, I do, because I need to be prepared for what Monday is going to look like. And so being able to know your boundaries and set your boundaries appropriately, that's something I've had to learn over the years. I do have 2 children. I do have a husband. They do expect to see me at some point. I do have a global team, so it means that I run long some hours of the weekday. But being able to create that blend for yourself, but also to set clear boundaries. If you don't set them, other people will set them for you. So just make sure that you're clear, set the boundaries there, and learn to kind of have people to work around them.
Great.
So it's a constant work in progress.
Perfect. 1 minute to spare too. So thank you all for letting us crash the party tonight. Paula, I'll go ahead and turn it back over to you.
Awesome. Oh my gosh, this has been incredible. As you can see by the chat and the Q&A lighting up, you absolutely resonated with our members. So on behalf of the association, Ta-Nikka, Cisco, thank you so much for pouring such valuable information into.
Thank you, Paula.
Yes, and we will take you up on sending any questions. Yes.
Okay.
So
awesome.
For those of you who are listening, I'm sure that it also resonated with you, but your feedback is important to us. So if you haven't already done so, please click on the link that you see there. It's also in the chat, and you can answer survey questions to find out exactly how we did tonight. So continue to look out for more information and more wonderful webinars just like this one. We have another one coming up on Thursday afternoon around entrepreneurship, so you won't want to miss that either. Until then, have a wonderful rest of your evening. And like Ta-Nikka said, try your best to have that work-life blend.
Yes. Thank you all. Have a great night.
You too.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.